Two police officers wearing blue uniforms arrived at my garage in a patrol car. I secretly observed them from my position beneath the lift. It was unusual to see law enforcement so cheerful, but their faces grew serious as they approached. After confirming who I was, they delivered grim news about my wife. Something had happened at our house, and she was now in the hospital. They didn't give many details. I tried to leave right away, but they stopped me, asking questions. They wanted to know where I had been during the past 3 hours. I explained that I had been at the garage all day and told them to check with my 2 mechanics for confirmation. I admitted that I had briefly stepped out, about 10 minutes around 11 a.m., to grab coffee for all of us. One of the officers stayed to talk to Rick and Joel, while the other took down the name of the coffee shop. He then asked to see my car. I had no problem with that and said my truck was parked outside. I led him to the vehicle, and he thoroughly inspected it before finally saying I could head to the hospital. When I arrived, a hospital staff member explained Emily's condition, the extent of her injuries, the blood transfusion, and that she was in surgery. What struck me was the half-smile the doctor wore while delivering this update. Felt deeply inappropriate. Leaving the hospital, I was intercepted again by the same officers. We grabbed some coffee in the cafeteria, and they asked more questions, this time about my marriage. I told them Emily and I had married 8 years ago, both of us later in life. She had worked hard to become a successful attorney and had only recently left her job to rest and prepare for motherhood. Sort of a break before entering the next chapter. They asked why she was home during the week, and I explained that quitting her job was a conscious decision to slow down before a decade of family responsibilities. I told them we were doing well and excited to become parents. Then they asked if I knew Edward Palmer. I told them honestly that I didn't recognize the name. They walked off without further explanation. I trusted Rick and Joel to close the garage and went straight home. When I arrived, 2 forensic specialists and a detective were already combing through the place. The detective introduced himself, told me what little he knew, and repeated the same questions the other officers had, with one additional one. He asked if I knew anything about the small amount of blood found in the downstairs bathroom. I told him I had no idea. I then asked why they were focusing so much on me and whether they were considering other leads. He assured me that multiple angles were being pursued and mentioned his colleague was speaking to Mrs. Palmer. Curious, I asked politely about Edward Palmer. The detective declined to comment, saying it wouldn't be appropriate. They left me in a fog of uncertainty. I went upstairs to our bedroom and stood silently, taking in the chaos. I thought to myself how surreal it all felt. Like a movie scene I would be shocked to see if it weren't my own life. Earlier in the day, around 10 a.m. at work, I started thinking about closeness. There's nothing unusual about this. They say guys think about closeness an average of 67 times per waking hour, and men virtually cut off from their wives for a month can double that. Since Emily left work, our 2 to 3 times a week has dropped to almost 0. Emily was either in a bad mood, bored and depressed, or too tired. Personally, I thought it was because her normal life was ending, and she was scared. Being a caring husband, I didn't want to pressure her. She'll come out of her fear at her own pace. I knew my life would change after having children, but I understood hers would be turned upside down. I kept daydreaming about our early years of marriage, where our bed life was anywhere, anytime. In any case, we made an effort to keep it fresh and new, as long as our imaginations existed, and then slowly fell into the automatic mode that long-term partners often do. I snapped out of my daze, realizing I needed to act, restore spontaneity, head home now and be close with Emily until you're completely spent. Decision made, it's time to leave and go home. I informed Mick and Pete that I'd be away for a while. Joel asked if I could test drive the car he just serviced. Returning home, a wave of disappointment hit me as I noticed a car I didn't recognize parked in the driveway. At first, I thought perhaps a friend had dropped by unexpectedly, ruining my plans, but I still decided to go inside. Maybe I could convince whoever it was to leave, and still salvage the evening without raising suspicion. As I stepped through the front door, a chill ran down my spine. I instinctively knew my marriage was over. The unmistakable sounds of pleasure echoed down the staircase. It was almost reflexive. I pulled out my phone to record, just as I would if a client accused me of damage at the shop. My heart pounding, I crept upstairs with the camera ready and peered through the bedroom doorway. Yes, it was Emily. And yes, it was some man I'd never seen before. They were tangled up in the middle of our bed, clearly enjoying themselves. Suppressing the overwhelming urge to lose control, I turned away. I can say with full honesty, that was the hardest thing I've ever done. My legs buckled, and I collapsed just outside the door, completely shattered. From a distance, I could still hear them reaching their peak. I don't know how long I stayed there. Eventually, the noises stopped and were replaced with soft conversation. That somehow made it worse, more intimate, and it tore me apart inside. I knew I had to think. I had to get away from the door. If I reacted emotionally, I'd end up putting that guy in the hospital. And myself in prison. Quietly, I rose and tiptoed downstairs. I dropped onto the sofa, away from the sights, the smells, the sounds of betrayal. Once free of emotional distraction, I did what I always did best. I formed a plan. Get him out of the room, confront him, kick him out the back door naked, and then repeat the process with Emily. No bruises, no witnesses. Maybe I could even avoid getting arrested. Luckily, I had just the right tool sitting in my workshop. A couple of years back in the Army Reserve National Guard, I was tasked with clearing supply trucks. That's when I found a device that I knew would come in handy one day. Police call it a stun grenade. Slightly larger than a regular grenade, it's a small canister with a pin and lever ignition system built for hostage rescues. It's made to cause minimal injury, but when it goes off, it flashes at a brightness of 8 million candles and delivers a 170 decibel shockwave. The flash alone can disable someone for at least 5 seconds. Fueled by rage, I mentally stitched together the rest of the plan. I couldn't just drop it on the floor, it would damage the house. So I took the device, glued a short rope to it, and made a small loop at the end. Once it was prepped, I crept upstairs. There was no need to be silent anymore. I could hear him moaning again through the bedroom door. I paused to grab my phone off the floor, where I had dropped it earlier, then peeked around the corner. Round 2 had begun. Emily was working him below the waist, clearly enjoying herself. I mentally rehearsed my steps, then drew in a long breath and moved. I stepped into the room and looped the rope around the hook on the base of the overhead light fixture, leaving the grenade suspended halfway to the floor. I yanked the pin out, slipped it into my pocket, and walked out. Covering my ears and squeezing my eyes shut, I braced myself. Even with my precautions, the result was overwhelming. I could feel the shockwave vibrate through me and saw the light through my closed eyelids. I ran back in, ready for the next part. But nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. Mr. Anonymous was lying on his back. There was definite trauma below the waist. Whether it was a cruel joke of nature or something had literally gone missing, I wasn't sure. Emily was sprawled on the floor, eyes unfocused, mouth gaping like a fish pulled from water. Stunned, I stumbled into the hallway to collect my thoughts. But I didn't get the chance. My thoughts were abruptly halted by 2 horrifying screams from the bedroom, followed by loud bangs and slamming doors. It dawned on me that I was in serious trouble. My plan had failed. Peeking once again into the chaotic scene, I saw the man stumble out of bed, clutching his groin and screaming in agony. Emily was nowhere to be seen. I assumed she was in the bathroom. I needed to erase any remaining evidence. Back in the bedroom, I found the small detonator I had removed earlier and quickly added it to the rope. There was nothing else salvageable. The rest must have been destroyed. Approaching the bathroom door carefully, I saw Emily on her knees, vomiting into the toilet. I felt nothing, no urge to help, no pity. I simply didn't care anymore. As I made my way toward the exit, something soft and warm caught my eye on the floor. I picked it up. It resembled the tip of a tongue. I dropped it into the toilet on the first floor and flushed. They wouldn't be reattaching that. Trying not to make a sound, I slipped down the street, thankful once again that our house was isolated from the neighbors. Halfway to the garage, I emptied my pockets into a roadside trash bin. 10 minutes later, I was back at my small workshop. I called Joel and Rick, my grimy, oil-stained employees and closest friends. They arrived quickly, immediately sensing something was wrong. I asked them to cover for me for the past 45 minutes. Without hesitation, they both said, "Of course, boss." Before they could commit too quickly, I warned them that what I'd done was serious. Once I explained, they might not be so quick to say yes. I admitted I didn't know what kind of charges I might face, maybe jail. But before I gave them the details, I threw on my old overalls and smeared my face and arms with greasy rag marks, prepping for the inevitable arrival of the cops. Joel and Rick looked at me like I had 3 heads as I summarized the last hour. Rick cracked first. He barely made it 15 seconds before exploding with laughter. Joel followed. Within moments, all 3 of us were laughing like lunatics. Took a solid 5 minutes to settle down. We shook hands. They promised to stand by me. Then they each returned to their messy workspaces. Over the next hour, I could still hear random bursts of laughter from the darker corners of the garage. Meanwhile, Emily, my wife, was about to face the full consequences she'd earned by turning her nose up at my modest friends. That night, I returned to clean the master bedroom. I washed the bathroom floor, threw out the bed sheets, reminded myself to buy a new rug. The torn curtains would need replacing too. I stayed busy to keep my mind from spiraling. It wasn't easy. The nonstop ringing phone and knocks on the door didn't help. Yes, the media was going wild. A man cheated on and someone losing their manhood? Tabloid gold. I answered the door once. I turned off my phone for the rest of the night. Finally, in silence, I was able to reflect. Did I regret it? Oddly, no. I loathed cheaters. I had seen how betrayal turned good people into hollow shells. The irony? I used to believe Emily shared my hatred for infidelity. I was dead wrong. What stunned me even more was her motivation. She always seemed loyal. Our physical life was great until recently. After hours of thinking, I found only one moment that stood out. 2 months ago, Emily told me she was retiring to enjoy her final days of freedom. That struck me as odd. I had assumed she'd work until she was at least 7 months pregnant. But she wanted one last taste of wildness before motherhood, she'd said. It made me uneasy. Just then, my personal cell phone rang, the number few people knew. Caller ID said it was Emily's parents. They lived about 3 hours away, still within the state. I picked up. I'd always had a decent relationship with them. After skipping most pleasantries, her mom got straight to the point. She asked if I had any idea why journalists were suddenly swarming their home. She said she couldn't go into details, but I'd probably find out soon anyway. Then she asked if I'd seen the local news. Something about a cheating woman who'd bitten off her lovers. I always enjoyed her mom's colorful expressions and blunt honesty, but that didn't make the call any easier. Yes, Mom. Look, there's no easy way to say this, so I'll get straight to it. The woman's name is Emily. Luckily, my confusion was interrupted by a scream followed by a beep. After hanging up the call, I noticed a warning on my phone screen. It reminded me that I had started recording the end of my marriage just 8 hours ago. I vaguely recalled leaving my phone by the bedroom door, capturing it all. I knew deep down, if I never understood why Emily did what she did, I'd never be able to trust another woman again. And if I couldn't trust, I'd probably die bitter and alone, stuck in a cycle of uselessness and resentment. Clinging to a thin strand of hope, I pressed play on the recording. I already knew what I would see. The wound was still too fresh. I didn't even look at the screen, just placed the phone on the floor. With only a view of the hallway ceiling, I had to imagine Mr. and Mrs. Infidelity lying side by side. The sound was faint. I downloaded the file to my computer and ran it through audio amplification software. This part of the conversation stood out. Emily, it was fantastic. This whole week has been amazing. Unknown man. Does it really have to end today? My offer still stands. Just give me your word, and I'll leave Melissa and marry you. Emily, well, yeah, it looks like it has to. Great way to start a marriage with a guy who ditches his wife and kids. No, Lucas, I love my husband too much to do that to him. He's a great man, and he'll be a great father. Then her voice changed, soft, almost rehearsed. After today, I'll be Mrs. Goody-Goody, a housewife, at least until the youngest of our kids start school. Unknown man. You can't love him that much. He's not the one lying here with you. Emily, you're wrong. I love him deeply. The moment I met him, I knew he was my only soulmate. I'll never meet another. I'm so lucky to have a man who spoils me, who'll care for me when I'm waddling around pregnant with his 2 or 3 kids. I want nothing more than to grow old and die in his arms, surrounded by our grandchildren. Unknown man. That was a sweet speech. But then why are you here with me? She paused for a long time. At least she had the decency to hesitate. Emily, I guess I missed who I used to be. I didn't get married until I was 31. And I was a little wild. I missed walking into a bar and having every guy stare at me. The thrill of leading someone on, and then choosing whether he gets what he wants. Lately, Lucas has been off deer hunting with his buddies every other weekend. 3 weeks ago, I walked into a bar just curious. One night was okay but disappointing. Then last Saturday, I walked into the bar you were in, and here we are. Unknown man, cold, Emily. Cold, Emily. Just think of this as the last hurrah. Unknown man. What's he complaining about? Anyway, come here. I turned the sound off at that point. I didn't need to hear more. At least I knew I was a good husband and a good lover. The problem wasn't me. The days that followed were hollow and disappointing. 2 days later, the media backed off. The street grew quiet again. The hospital called and said Emily wanted some pajamas. I didn't bother responding. She'd have to deal with those awful hospital gowns. A couple days after that, her father phoned. He apologized for his daughter's behavior and hoped we'd still keep in touch. To sweeten the conversation, he reminded me that he had another daughter, recently divorced. No thanks, Dad. That's a little too weird. For days after everything went down, the guy from the bedroom, Mr. Not So Impressive, was featured on the evening news. Turns out the media had uncovered his history as a repeat cheater. So there was a touch of poetic justice when it was reported that, although doctors managed to reattach his equipment, it was unlikely to ever function again. By the end of that week, I received an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Palmer, or Melissa, as she insisted I call her, was a pretty lady with sad eyes. She told me that she had heard rumors that I might have some evidence that could help her in her divorce case. I explained that maybe it was true, but I couldn't admit it without exposing myself. She understood everything and was very apologetic for asking. I told her I believed there was already enough circumstantial evidence for her divorce. She probably wouldn't even need what I had. If I turned out to be wrong, I'd gladly invite her back and reconsider. There was such deep sadness in her expression. I genuinely felt for her. I ended up showing her the recording, just the aftermath, the part after the flashbang. The sound of her husband's screams made her wince at first, but she quickly regained composure. Let's just say, she wasn't exactly grieving when she left. Being the helpful guy I am, I told her she could come back and get me if the sadness returned. Oh, and yeah, that wasn't the last time I saw Melissa Palmer. The last visitor I received, though, was probably the strangest. It was Saturday. I opened the front door to find the same detective I'd spoken to back on the day of the incident. Gone was the suit. He wore just jeans and a shirt now. Hey son, no, I won't come in. I just wanted to say, if there's not enough evidence, I recommended the case be closed. I thanked him genuinely. He turned to go but paused, looking back over his shoulder. Listen, I'm retiring at the end of the year. If I stop by again sometime, will you tell me how you pulled it off? I just smiled and wished him a good day. Emily's letter arrived the following Tuesday. My dear Lucas, I can't express how ashamed and sorry I am that I did this to you. I understand completely why you haven't come to see me, and I forgive you without reservation. I never fully considered the consequences of my actions. I truly didn't think my own parents would disown me. I know I've lost your love, trust, and respect, and that hurts more than I can bear. I understand if you never want to speak to me again. But if it helps your healing, please let me explain. Just know, everything that happened was entirely my fault. The doctors say I won't be able to speak normally for a long time, if ever. They believe I may have swallowed the tip of my tongue when I bit it off. They're suggesting some experimental stretching therapy that might restore partial function. I hope it works, so I can at least return to my career It's the only thing I have left to distract from what now looks like a dull, loveless, childless future. Ask for anything in the divorce, I'll sign it. If you can find it in your heart to keep me on your health insurance a little longer, I'll be forever grateful. Farewell, my love. I wish you happiness. I hope I haven't completely ruined your life. Yours, Emily, aka your cheating wife. The letter hit me harder than I expected. So much so, in fact, that I reversed my earlier decision and sent her pajamas to the hospital. Now, where are Rick and Joel's phone numbers? Do I owe them a beer keg? And that's the end of today's story. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next video.